Michael, it's a real pleasure to have you here today, and I look forward to unpacking all these amazing things about your company, CraniUS. Could you kind of start out and tell us a little history of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you think about companies, I think about chapters of a book, right? And CraniUS actually is not the first chapter of the journey that, got us to where we're at today and the technology we're going to talk a little more about in this interview. CraniUS was founded by Dr. Gordon in 2021. And Dr. Chad Gordon is a at Johns Hopkins. He's a director of neuroplastic surgery, which is a field of medicine that he actually pioneered, which is an intersection between neurosurgery and plastic surgery. He's classically trained as a plastic surgeon, and he has been a tremendous innovator in the space, specifically in the skull space and the temporal space. So think about the soft tissue space on the side of your head, and has had many innovations and inventions that he has actually sold out into the market over the last 10 years. And truly what we're talking about today is a culmination of the last decade of work. And it really stems from his idea of thinking about patient outcomes, not just in the health of the patient, but also restoring the patient to symmetry and taking away social stigmas and making sure the patient actually returns to form. And so it actually started about a decade ago when he started working with some of the best neurosurgeons in the world at Mass General at Harvard. And what he was seeing is after, patients were having surgeries, and having their skulls replaced, the traditional cranial implants that have been around for decades, they really accounted for the bone loss that you had and traditionally see in brain disease or brain trauma. But what he was seeing post-op, anywhere from 3 to 6 months, was a lot of deformities that were actually starting to build. And that was because of this temporal region. If you feel on the side of your face, the soft tissue and fat and muscle. And what he was seeing is a lot of atrophy. So patients would actually have dents in the side of their head. So his first innovation or invention was a better cranial implant that had a bulk out that accounted not just for the bone space, but for the muscle and fat. And the reason that's important is if you think about the bone is actually 4 to 5 millimeters thick, which is really actually short and really small area. But the fat and muscle is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. So this bulk out that he built for traditional implants actually created a lot of space for him to utilize. And what he really started to think about, even when he sold that invention to Stryker, licensed that invention to Stryker worldwide, that not only did he, return patients to symmetry, but now he sort of had a capsule where he could embed technology to think about modulating the brain. So starting to cross over into the neurosurgery space. And that's what's led us to where we're at today with CraniUS, which is the holy grail, as Dr. Gordon really thought about in medicine delivery directly to the brain.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. He kind of has the plastic surgery side of the background versus just plain old neurosurgery, which is kind of a really interesting, creative way to look at it. And it sounds like he's just a phenomenal problem solver. Can you talk about where you've picked up? So when you joined the company and how you're leading the organization now?
Yes. So I joined the company in July of 2021. We really started formal operations in September of 2021. My background is actually non-traditional. It's outside of the space of medical devices or therapeutics. And my background is more on the retail as well as brand management side and thinking specifically on the general management side. So the last 10 years of my career I actually spent at Under Armour right down the road in Baltimore. And the reason I was actually drawn to Under Armour is I've had the opportunity to work at some really great Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies in a number of different leadership capacities. But it really comes down to, when I think about the remainder of my career, impact, right? Impact on individuals, on their lives, on their performance. And Under Armour gave me a really great taste, right? The mission was really to make athletes better. So how do you just get that extra 1% out of athletes and really, improve their performance? When I think about what we're doing at CraniUS, it's another level above that, right? We're actually thinking about, breaking down the barriers, no pun intended, that have kept, this space in medicine in the neuro space and fighting some of the worst brain diseases that are out there: Alzheimer's, glioblastoma, Parkinson's. Really, there's been a massive challenge called the blood-brain barrier that's been out there for the last several thousand years. And the blood-brain barrier, the way people should think about it in the audience, is it's an extra layer of protection that that has been built up in our bodies over years to keep harmful, chemicals out of our brain, which is great when you think about it on the surface. But the challenge is it actually keeps therapeutics or medicines that are, given by injection form or pill form, getting through the bloodstream, they get blocked. And so they don't actually reach the brain where the disease lives. And so we've had such little progress in treating these diseases. So for me, thinking about that leap from Under Armour to CraniUS, truly thinking about impacting the lives of millions and millions of patients that are suffering from these terrible diseases with, just not really a lot of other alternatives right now today, Stephen. That was really the jumping off point for me, and what really captured, my mind and my heart and my family's, quite honestly, in joining this company and going out there to build the technology around it.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really intriguing is it's a platform. So it's kind of like the space shuttle. I know the space shuttle, everyone thought the space shuttle went to the moon. It really just went into a low Earth orbit, but it was instrumental in getting satellites and different things like the International Space Station going. And the space shuttle is a platform for this delivery. I was just kind of like really curious, because we work with a lot of companies that are developing combination products. How has that been like inspiring to you? And then how has that been a challenge for your organization right out of the gate, become trying to be a platform for direct delivery of drugs into the brain?
Yeah, I think you just said it really well, because the first statement you made is something we talk about internally at CraniUS. One, we look for people who love to solve really complex problems. We are truly flying to the moon for the first time, and within our technology, we have some very novel pieces, right? Things that we're creating and we're inventing. So from that standpoint, it's incredibly inspiring. And when you think about the combination side, it is more complexity, right? Because you're developing both the drug and the device side of things. The value, though, overall, is that when you think about traditional medical device companies, this is a little bit different. We're truly a therapeutic when you think about the combination here, right? It takes two to tango. You're going to need the drug, but right now today, the pharmaceutical companies don't have the vehicle to drive and deliver the medicine directly to the brain chronically over not just days and weeks, but months and years, and actually imagining that this could be something that is implanted fully for a patient and being able to treat them for the rest of their life or as long as they need to be treated. So
Yeah,
that's
and Michael, let me just kind of explain for our audience. So you have this platform, which is a revolutionary way to deliver medicine directly to the brain, which is phenomenal. I think you're also going to get new molecules maybe developed, just knowing that technology is going to be available. But I think what's interesting from like a regulatory standpoint is you can have the drug that quote unquote works, and you can have a delivery device. But the way the FDA and many of the global regulatory authorities, they're going to treat this like a combination product. So right. It's kind of like a combined product. And so it's the drug, which is the molecule and its formulation. It is the delivery device, which includes all of its features. There may be software and other features associated with the device. I noticed your product has charging. So you're charging a battery and you're doing that remotely, which is phenomenal. You have all those things, but then you have the drug device interaction, and all three of those things have to be put into a single submission and then approved. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how do you pick your winner for getting this product approved? Because you know that it takes two to tango, and you have to have this marriage of the molecule, the delivery system, and the interaction between the two all submitted as a single package. And your company is a platform company, not necessarily a drug development company. Can you explain to the audience that challenge and how you pick a winner to be the first to kind of see the light of day for ultimately benefiting patients?
It's a fantastic point. And we are actually in a very beneficial situation, which I'll talk about in a second. But, I think one thing for the audience is when you think about combination products, Stephen, as you well, know from your company's side, there aren't a lot of, of these products out in the market because of the fact, if you're a startup, developing both the drug and the device is very expensive, right? And so as we thought about, CraniUS and how we actually protect our risks, so we're not fighting a risk on both sides when we're working with the FDA, we are truly more experts on the device side. So we needed to look at it and say, are there drugs out there that have precedent history that we can leverage, that we can actually leverage work from safety standpoint in terms of interactions with humans in studies previously. And so for us, the drug that we're looking at is topotecan, which is an anti-cancer drug for glioblastoma. And glioblastoma, unfortunately, you might know this is a terminal disease, right? And about a 15-month life expectation. So there are no other alternatives in the market today, right?
Yeah, it's a very aggressive tumor in the brain.
Yeah, very aggressive tumor. So not a great outcome today, and that's something we're looking to change. The good news is we think about convection enhanced delivery, CED, which is the method of delivery, which is actually a force through pumps and catheters to drive medicine to create a cloud-like form around the tumor, and almost thinking about bathing that tumor with the medicine. For us, that is not a new concept. Convection enhanced delivery has been worked on for the last couple of decades. More importantly, topotecan has been utilized in human studies and been shown to be safe. So we're actually able to leverage in a 505(b)(2) path, which you might be familiar with. We believe that's our opportunity in front of us to leverage precedent data on the drug side to minimize the risk. So for us, it's about our primary endpoint when we go into humans is to show that we can actually deliver the drug where it needs to go and show and demonstrate convection, that cloud-like formation around the tumor. For us, the drug efficacy is on the pharmaceutical side, right? And we want those experts to actually join the party and help us bring more and more drugs to actually get approved for direct administration to the brain. So we start with a drug that actually has a history and has precedent the FDA is actually familiar with and comfortable with in terms of its safety with human patients.
Yeah, I think having a drug that already has a safety profile and an efficacy profile is a phenomenal way to start. And then is this a program that you're partnering with a pharmaceutical company, or are you doing this all on your own?
Yeah, so we're having those conversations early on right now, with some companies out there. But yes, if you think about the future, the idea, and if you think about the business model, truly, it's about us as a manufacturer of a device, finding the pharmaceutical companies and the drug companies that are willing to partner, utilize our device to take their drugs through for formal approval, because that's where the FDA is seeing the risk is on the drug side. And that gets back to the earlier discussion point around not just new drugs, but other drugs that are out there right now. Because if you talk to pharmaceutical companies, they will say, we believe we have drugs that can be effective on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. The reality is the blood-brain barrier is causing these challenges where we have to increase the dosage so high in hopes to get a little bit through the blood-brain barrier. We're causing all kind of collateral damage across the rest of the organs in the body. So if you can actually get the drug, and bypass the blood-brain barrier directly to that area, there is a lot of hope that there are drugs that are actually sitting on the shelves that they spent millions, in some cases billions of dollars in development, can actually be resurrected. And that is the power of the platform of the device that we're bringing to market with NeuroPass.
And then if you're not able to get a partner, but you have the funding, would you be willing just to go alone? And now you find yourself as the CEO of a biopharmaceutical company that has this novel drug delivery platform. I'm just kind of curious, like what plans you would have in your mind, or is now the time to really figure out who the strategic partner is going to be to join you and be the first using this technology, which will certainly not be the last.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I would say the primary, thought is to find those partners, but at the same time, as a CEO, as you well know, you need to have the optionality and be prepared to actually go it alone if you need to. And at the end of the day, for us, it's about the patients, right? It's about the millions of patients and making sure that this gets out into the hands of patients, down the road with whatever drug or whatever treatment we're talking about. And so for me, it's not just about finding the right partner that has the right drugs. It's about finding the right partner that's going to take this all the way down the road. Otherwise, we are in it for the long game, and we're prepared to do that.
Yeah. So I think what you're experiencing right now at the early stage of your business is something that we see a lot with combination product companies. It can be somebody who has the novel molecule and they know they need a complex kind of new delivery system for this novel molecule. And they kind of find themselves like learning medical devices and trying to figure out finding a partner for the delivery side. Then we find people with novel delivery systems and they're shopping for the molecules. And then they find out that, wow, they're going to become a biopharma company. as a result. And it's all about getting that first product approved, because once the product is kind of validated for an approved product, the device aspects are kind of taken out of the equation to a large extent. And for any subsequent product approvals, it's just how the molecule interacts with the device on a new specific change with that. So along those lines, are you anticipating any changes in the formulations, viscosities, kind of volumes or characteristics of these drugs, so that your platform on a design space basis can accommodate some of the future anticipated products that might be, using your delivery system?
Right. So again, it's a great point for us. I think right now we're focused on topotecan and we're focused on GBM, and understanding the platform application is there. We believe that we have the flexibility to be able to accommodate those drugs, and we have the mechanisms to actually, expand up or down to those, things like molecule sizes you have to take into account. There's going to need to be additional testing there, right? And that will happen with partners and co-development, as we move forward. But the focus right now is very much on topotecan and thinking about that specifically. As you probably know as a CEO, the incredible thing about the power of our technology, but also our patent portfolio. And Chris mentioned before our wireless charging, that we've actually is another novel, charging technology that is going to be MRI safe and compatible, that, we're going to be able to charge at a distance, and we have IP around that. That's a super exciting, what I like to call a shiny new object. I do believe that could have its own, application and be its own company someday in and of itself. But for me as a CEO right now, I think our team really needs to stay focused. And so my job is to think about what's coming next and preparing the team for that, making sure we have the flexibility to scale up and scale down. But I have the team very much focused on topotecan and thinking about, GBM specifically right now today.
Yeah. And Michael, that's so refreshing, and that's very investment grade. I think a lot of CEOs that have like ownership of a platform, as well as all the IP around that platform, they start thinking about all the infinite possibilities, and then they start taking their very finite resources that they have very early in their organization, including their financial resources, and then they start splitting those on parallel paths. And I've only seen probably a dozen companies in the last 20 years just self-destruct doing that. And it's kind of like a false promise. So it's really refreshing to hear you as a CEO having that laser beam focus on getting this first product approved. It also, you picked a product that has very few alternatives in terms of, if you have that diagnosis, you're going to want to try this. So if I went to the doctor today and I had that diagnosis, I'd be the first person I'm calling you, right? Because you have limited options and you have limited time. And so I think from a risk benefit standpoint, I would imagine there's got to be some risks with this technology, but the benefit is going to be so high. So you kind of dwarf the risks, which makes it easy for the FDA to look at that risk benefit equation and, rule favorably for ultimately the patients that deserve this therapy.
So that's certainly the strategy. Yeah, that's certainly the strategy that we have here is, thinking about that risk to benefit for the patient, thinking about the patients who really need this most too right now, right? That don't have any other alternatives that are out there. Interestingly enough, Dr. Henry Brem, who is at Hopkins as well, has worked closely with us in the past, and he is the inventor of something called the Gliadel wafer, which is actually, if you think about it, it's truly like a wafer or sponge soaked in chemotherapy that 20 years ago he invented and placed it around the resection area where the tumor was carved out. The challenge was it was a one and done thing. You close the patient back up, the medicine ran out over time. He did extend patient outcomes though, and for him, he was, he believed that was the first step in a journey. When he looks at a company like CraniUS, he said to me, this is the chapter of the book that I was looking to close, and I was hoping it was going to happen much faster. But the reality is technology had to come. Things like wireless charging are important, and even just convection enhanced delivery evolving to where it is today and the acceptance that you have around that. Those are really important. So timing does become a piece of all this as well. But to your point, yes, it is very much part of the strategy to think about this in terms of not like at the end of the day, it's about the patients, right? And who can we help and who needs it most? But also, to your point, there's just a litany of companies that run out of cash, that, get distracted, who have an amazing ideas, but there's a graveyard of these ideas because, they didn't stay focused and they didn't have the right strategy to honestly get this out there, to get a proof of concept, to get the first in human study completed, so people could really understand and say, wow, there's something here that we can actually latch onto, and we're willing to spend the money and resources to partner with CraniUS or whatever other company that's out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of CEOs, they're visionaries. They're a little bit manic, which means they have hundreds of ideas popping into their brain every hour. And I think it's the CEOs that have focus and discipline that they can take that visionary aspect and that mania and really channel it for purpose. And so I think by keeping your focus on the patients, that's going to absolutely drive your organization and this technology all the way to hopefully fruition and approval in the upcoming years. Let's talk a little bit about how this device works. So I'm a layman. I don't know a lot about the technology, but I'd be kind of concerned that I had this like big thing kind of on my skull. So if you could talk a little bit about like what the profile of the device looks like. And then the other thing I would be worried about is just like a brain infection. So just like having a port that into my brain, like how would I keep that clean? So could you talk about those two aspects of your technology?
Yeah, it's a great point. So a couple of things. One is, you will not actually be able to see this. You could have this, in your temporal space right now, Stephen, and nobody would know that you're having medicine delivered. It actually is about 5 by 9 centimeters, which isn't that small. But if you think about the temporal space and the fat and muscle that is actually fairly non-functional, that you can actually pull out, that opens up the space for us to embed this technology and this device itself, number one. Number two, Dr. Gordon has been working as a neuroplastic surgeon for the last decade, and he has put in more implants than probably anybody in the country. And his incidence of infection rate is, in the low single digits and as good as you'll find out there. So he has worked in this space. He has invented in this space. The materials that we're using, I think it's a great point. Like a lot of companies that are actually trying to work around in this area right now are trying to retrofit other devices on the market to apply to medicine delivery to the brain. We actually had to build this from the ground on up. And believe it or not, this actual product has been in development for almost 6 years. So even 4 years before CraniUS got formed, Dr. Gordon had a team of engineers that were working, more student teams that he was bootstrapping to help start to build this technology out. And so they started with the premise and the idea of things like infection. What are FDA approved materials that we can already leverage? How do you minimize risk from the ground on up before you actually build the device and try to back into something? So that was a really important thing that actually drew me in early on when I talked to Dr. Gordon about the risk profile, thinking about things like infection. He really thought hard and long before and had a lot of experience with cranial implants to think about what are the things that I need to make sure I remove in terms of risk immediately off the table, and the materials that are in contact and from a biological standpoint, make sure those are materials I'm already using that are shown to have, no issue in terms of infection. Those are things that he really laid out foundationally before anybody even spent a minute on developing the technology, which I think has really put us in a unique and interesting position.
Yeah, I think you're talking about biocompatibility, and that's like super important, especially as you get into those sensitive areas. Anything with the eye or the spinal cord or the brain, something the FDA is super concerned about. All right, let's kind of go down and explore a couple other little nuances for your technology. So you're into the brain implant business. You're the CEO of this company. You're technology focused. You're building an IP portfolio. I have to ask this question. So Elon Musk has a company called Neuralink, and it's a brain implant that is meant to connect the cyber world to the human brain. I'm just wondering, like, what is your perspective on that ambition and that technology?
We love it. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, right? And one of the things that we were talking about before we even started the interview is if you think about all the progress that's been made, on innovation and other organs in the body the last 50 years, I think the next 50 are going to be around the brain. And so you're seeing a lot of money that's actually shifting over investment over into treating, challenges with the brain, because quite honestly, there hasn't been a lot of progress there. It's been very, very frustrating. I think, from a batteries and wires standpoint and the brain, computer interface that Elon Musk is working on, I think that's fantastic. I think it's great work. we look at ourselves as not BCI, but BMI, so the brain medicine interface, right? We're actually the vehicle that is getting the medicine to deliver, even more tangible, and I think even closer in terms of impact for patients at the end of the day in terms of what we're doing. So we love all of the work that's happening right now. We love the work that Elon Musk is doing. I think it creates more value and interest in the space. And we know this already. There's millions of patients that are suffering and just do not have ideal outcomes today. So I think the more that we can bring, additional appreciation, not that it doesn't exist out there, but just to think about, we're actually now starting to tap into the opportunities to really change the game as you think about, modulation with the brain, which is just somewhere there has not been enough progress over the last 50 years. I think that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 50. So I'm glad he's there. It certainly brings some validation, not that it needed with the brain and all the challenges we have there, but having somebody like him and an innovator in the space, which honestly is not really competing with what we're doing on the medicine side, is nothing but good, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think what's funny is Elon Musk kind of gets vilified a little bit for trying this. But I was having an argument with a person in the Starbucks line waiting for our coffee on this exact topic. And it's like, look, some of the innovation that's going to come out can be used for modern medicine. And this could be, there's diseases like Parkinson's and things like that, which you can modulate the brain with electricity and have a better outcome, or just kind of tamp down some of the symptoms, for example. And then this whole thing of having an implant, just the materials of construction, the design, the features of the device. There's probably things there that Elon Musk would probably open source that your company could pick up. And he's got a history of doing that. So he's open sourced a lot of the Tesla design, and IP is now available to many, many automakers. And it's free. It's a free license to use that technology. So I'm hoping, I would kind of watch that. The next question is a harder question. Who's going to be first in patient or first in human, CraniUS or Neuralink?
Like I said, I mean, for me, it's not as critical, because if I think about, the focus that Elon Musk has versus more the broad medicine delivery that we're working on, he obviously has had his FDA approval for a first in human study. I don't know the exact date on when that's happening. Where we're at in our journey is, we're moving towards locking our device, which is sort of the predecessor to your final verification and validation testing, and then getting into the first in human study. So our hope is that happens in the next 18 to 24 months. So it might happen, before us, but again, the way I look at it is he is not necessarily a competitor to CraniUS.
Not at all.
Doing.
Not at all.
So he'll probably get there, at the same time or a little bit before us. But it'll be interesting to see, the path behind that for both of our companies. But, I'm obviously very focused on what we're doing, but I really, truly appreciate and stay very connected to see what else is going on out there, because in a lot of cases, a lot of the technologies in its infancy as it relates to the brain, and specifically on the BCI side of things. So we continue to be very updated and educated on what's going on there, and supportive, because I think it helps to kind of bring our story up as well. The more activity that's happening in the space.
And then from a design perspective, like how long is the implant expected to be around before it needs to be replaced or removed? What are you guys thinking for that kind of like shelf life while it's in use?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is, because of the location of where we're at. I mean, certainly it's always an invasive surgery, but we're not going into the brain, right? We're actually, the same spot that you would have a cranial implant. So it can be extracted if needed, with a procedure that's probably a 30 or 45-minute procedure. But the idea is a lot of folks suffering from these diseases, they are chronic and will likely need to have them in for a number of years. Thus, the need for a wireless technology to recharge our battery over time. So, you think about pacemakers traditionally are in, 5 to 7 years. Sometimes they're replaced, even a little bit more of an invasive surgery. Ours is even less invasive in that case. And, it'll be dependent on the treatment, really, but to extract it out after a couple of years is not I would say, I don't want to ever say anything is a minor surgery, but it is certainly not something that's touching or encroaching upon the brain. So, we do expect in a lot of cases, this will be chronic delivery and will be implanted for, probably in the order of a year plus in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And then also on the technology, I think you mentioned that you have refillable drug cartridges that you can swap out. Could you kind of explain how that works and
Yeah.
with that swap out procedure? Is that a medical procedure? Is that something that's going to be done at home, or how would that work?
Yeah, again, going back to the sort of, not even premise, but our founding principle of trying not to recreate the wheel. We actually utilize a portacath, which is really the same portacath that is FDA approved and used in the chest wall for breast cancer patients. And so you use a non-boring needle that basically, you can feel the ridge, because our device, though it is underneath the skin and the scalp, you'll actually be able to feel the portacath. You'll be able to feel it but not see it. So, you'll be able to go in for your refills, depending on what the time frame is going to be for your medicine. And, a physician or a nurse practitioner will be able to actually refill this device. So it's not an actual cartridge. It's actually a refill of the medicine into a portacath, which is something that already exists out there today. So again, that was a big focus. And another thing I love, that everything he had thought of is like, what else exists out there that we can leverage that the FDA already has approved. And so we made that part of our design and our solution.
Yeah, it makes no sense to reinvent the wheel when the wheel is already invented.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll just kind of tell you a story. So we got to work with a program that was kind of going into its pivotal clinical trial. And it was a really advanced brain treatment that the drug needed to be ported directly into the brain. And I had a lot of concerns. I talked to the CEO and I said, hey, I'm a little bit concerned about the repeatability of this procedure for the clinical trial. And of course, the CEO at the time assured me that these were the top neurosurgeons in the country, and they know how to hook up tubing and port the drug into the brain per the instructions for use. I still, again, had quite a bit of concern. This was kind of still before human factors were a big deal. Turns out that pivotal trial, the product worked, but there was so much variability in the delivery that the trial results were inconclusive. The company was unable to raise the next round of money and then subsequently went out of business. And the sad part is there's a whole class of patients that really lost access to a phenomenal treatment just because someone didn't have the wherewithal to like kit up the delivery system and then do the proper human factors and usability engineering studies to make sure that even a neurosurgeon wouldn't make a mistake in the delivery. So when I came across your technology, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be fantastic, because we're completely letting the device delivery system basically manage the delivery of the drug, and we're not fumbling around with spare parts with a neurosurgeon trying to do this in the theater. So that's a phenomenal thing. But I kind of wonder, like, has human factors or usability engineering come up in your discussions at all? And I think, like you mentioned, a doctor or a nurse would be the person who would be administering the needle to refill the device.
Yeah.
Have you guys thought that like maybe there needs to be inherent design features or usability studies or human factor studies to really make sure that's a foolproof exercise?
I mean, such a important sort of lesson, I think, for a lot of CEOs out there, myself included, right? And I'll give you a couple anecdotes, because even in our early development, you realize that you actually have to practice. You have to really practice a lot. And so one of the things we do with all of our engineers is we actually have each engineer, they're not surgeons, actually perform on a cadaver, and Dr. Gordon just talks them through it to help us build the right work instructions, to even see an engineer that's not a surgeon can actually place the device and place the catheters and all those types of things. And obviously we've got to continue to evolve with human factors and stereotactics. All those pieces will be part of it. But you're absolutely right. Like, at the end of the day, you can assume all day that, hey, neurosurgeons are, incredible at doing this, but like, we've broken it down to, now we haven't got to me yet. I'm not the most, I'm not sure, but I will be like I'll be the hardest test of anybody to demonstrate that I actually can do it. But like, we do a cadaver in our office probably at least once a month, if not more. And we're going to continue to increase that, whether it's a pig head or a cadaver head of a human. Like, we have to continue to understand what a person that's not doing this every day in their life needs to understand, and make sure there's not the variability that you talked about before. So it's still a work in progress for us. We don't have all the answers, but I think the more that you actually kind of pressure test this, and pressure test it with people who are not going to be world-class neurosurgeons. If you can actually, it's kind of like, it's the simplification, right? It's one of the key foundations of our company is how do you try not to recreate the wheel? How do you make it so simple that the variability will be very low here? I think it's a tremendous story that you share, Stephen. And it's one that we've learned, right? We've taken for granted, hey, the refills are going to be easy. And then you realize when you do it in a pig, you have different complications to think about. They got thicker skulls and more skin, and you don't feel it as easily. So, all right, so now we have to design and keep that in account. Obviously, for less of a hurdle with a human, thinner skin, but you learn so much, and it's about the preparation. There's a reason this process takes a while, right? There's a reason for it, because you have to be able to repeat it. You have to be able to make sure there's not variability, because at the end of the day, understanding these patients are desperate for a solution. It's still about safety and making sure that we can do this time and time and time again. And so that is critical. And it's something that's really a part of how we conduct ourselves and how we, the process in our office with our engineering team every day.
Yeah. So I think like making the design and the interface with the person using the device, making it as intuitive as possible is so important. Just making it so that your intuition kind of guides you in the right direction. Because let's face it, most of these neurosurgeons are men. The men, what do? They take the instructions for use and they like, oh, let me just start using this right thing. So I think it's like it's our duty to make sure these things are as intuitive as possible so that people get this right. And what a shame, right? So you have a diagnosis, you have a drug, you have a treatment, and then that last mile of delivery, like there's a problem, right? And so we think of that like the final mile of transportation, which is like, okay, you took a flight to a big city, and then you took a train, but then you still have to walk the last mile. And it's like, how are you going to do that? Like, what if you have a broken foot? Like, what is your transportation? Well, thank goodness for Uber, right? Or thank goodness for the little Lime scooters that you can get. So I think in a lot of cases, the drug delivery is like getting that molecule all the way to where it's supposed to be, and not just delivering the drug systemically to the whole body. The whole body doesn't need the treatment. The brain needs the treatment. The other thing that's really exciting, I just wanted to share with you, just to give you more motivation to stay disciplined, stay focused. We were at a large combination products conference in Sweden, hosted by the Parenteral Drug Association, PDA, and they call it the Universe of Prefilled Syringe, but it's really just a combination product conference. And one of the big trends is alternative routes of administration. So you think of the Parenteral Drug Association. Parenteral means kind of like injection, right? But there's so many other different ways to deliver drug. And one of the ones that's getting quite a bit of traction is an olfactory delivery, which is another way to get drugs to the brain. And so you can imagine somebody has like a bad migraine situation. So they have like chronic migraine headaches. I would argue 10 years in the future, you're going to take a nasal spray that gets in the olfactory, and you're going to deliver the drug that way. And the olfactory, unfortunately, is not the only. It's not a surefire way to do that delivery of drugs to the brain. So we're going to need what I call ported systems, right, to get the technology that you guys are leveraging, which is a proven technology. We absolutely have to develop that. One area that I think is really exciting that may not be on your radar, it may be on your radar, is gene therapy, which is really type of cell therapy. You kind of like program the genes to make the cells do the work to cure the disease or to treat the disease. And what's interesting is people are realizing that just like a systemic dose of the gene therapy is not the most efficient way to do it. You may have like an organ specific deficiency that needs correction, and that obviously that could be the brain and the brain matter. And so I'm just wondering if any of the gene therapy companies have approached your organization to talk about the delivery of gene therapy to the brain and what that would mean to your business, and if that's a partnership that you're interested in or looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always open to all conversations. It goes back, I think, a little bit to our prior conversation. It's not something, even when we go and we talk to investors and we, when we've raised money in the past, we probably don't spend as much time talking about gene therapy or stem cells, but we do believe the opportunity does exist with our device to be that system that actually delivers it over time. We've tried to stay focused on where we're at, but that is part of how we're considering, the power of our device, right? Is that things like that, these emerging technologies that still need a transport system to get to where they need to be, and how can we enable that through our NeuroPass system? So we've had some initial conversations. I would say our focus has been more, on the therapeutics in the specific areas around GBM, and then I think right behind that is Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But I think that the world is a little bit of our oyster in regards to thinking about it, even enabling some of these newer, more acceptable technologies in gene therapy, stem cell, which isn't new, obviously, but it's certainly something that's emerging and important. So I see it as an opportunity, and it's something I share probably more with the industry side, and have had some initial conversations. I don't think it'll be the first thing that we tackle, but it's something that's certainly on our radar.
Yeah, and I think you passed the test, right? So you're not letting that opportunity kind of like break your focus on what you're supposed to be doing now. I think just for our audience is like, this technology has so many applications beyond just traditional drugs that might have been shelved because there's no way to get it effectively to the brain, but the most modern medicines, and treating it directly. We're working with a program that can basically cure hearing loss, but you have to deliver the gene therapy to an organ inside the ear. And it turns out that the delivery equation is about half the equation. So like, they have the gene therapy, but you have to get it in a very reliable way. And a lot of the gene therapies, and this is the reason I mentioned gene therapy, it's the fastest growing part of life science. So over the next 5 years, some people are forecasting the gene therapy space to grow on average 40% year over year, which is outrageous.
Yeah.
And so we're really, as an industry, not prepared for that. And what I've noticed is the gene therapy industry is not prepared for the drug delivery side of the equation. So I would just please be ready. There will be other founders, CEOs on the gene therapy side looking to partner with you. And I think it's a phenomenal opportunity. And again, it's that last mile in the equation, and it's becoming incredibly important. And if you kind of underestimate what's happening, we're actually seeing gene therapy clinical trials fail because they don't have a kitted system. So what's happening is a nurse is grabbing random hospital stock, random lengths of tubing, random materials of construction of tubing, and then they administer the gene therapy in an IV infusion setting. That's most typical. And then the therapy doesn't work. Well, like, why didn't it work? It turns out that the delivery didn't work. So the gene therapy is flawless. It's just the delivery system robbed the patient of the full dose.
Yeah.
And so this is I think you're going to get more inquiries on that, and anything you can do to accelerate your current program, I think it's going to really go a long way for the patients that need this, especially the brain tumor patients who really are basically getting a death sentence with that diagnosis. So imagine how much hope you can give to those patients. It's really, really transformative.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I kind of take this from a former CEO I used to work with at Under Armour, and he was all about sweating every single detail, right? And certainly we're living in a regulated environment, so you better be doing that. But I also think about sweating every detail to also think about opportunity too, right? So we have a phenomenal team at CraniUS. We have a great blend of experience, but also younger talent that is unencumbered. And even just building our IP portfolio, we'll have 8 issued patents by the end of Q1. We were constantly thinking about like what is coming next. And to our discussion earlier, not to go chase that necessarily, but let's make sure we capture that. Then we have a sort of process to capture that and start working on the IP. But let's make sure we capture those ideas, that we can start building our portfolio so we're ready to go when it's time. And so I think about the sort of sweating every detail seems to be a risk management play, but it's also an opportunity play, and thinking through what is coming next year. How could I make this better? Knowing that we need to be good enough to get to the next step, because I'm sure, Stephen, you had a lot of experience with people who engineers are perfectionists by nature, right? And so, as you know, when you're funded by investors, you need to get to the next step to make this real. Because again, we go back to the graveyard idea. There's so many amazing ideas that are in the graveyard because people are too slow, or didn't actually good enough wasn't enough, to get them to this milestone. They thought they had to be above the bar, and they drain themselves of funding. it is really a process that you have to go through. And perfection is something you have to work towards over time. And it's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to happen, at first in human. It's going to be good enough, and it's going to be very safe. Safety is something we never compromise on. But, those are the things that I think are lessons learned. And I think, so I just thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah. And so I'm a reformed perfectionist. I'm a chemical engineer by training. And how I actually broke my perfectionist tendencies was I worked with a software development team. And I noticed how the team was being managed. And right when we were getting close to releasing the next version of the software, myself or another engineer, we'd be like, hey, we can add another feature. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could fix this or make this a little bit more user-friendly? And the program manager would say, yes, we're totally going to do that in the next version. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think for the drug development CEOs out there, you kind of need to go study how software is developed, and definitely take a page out of that playbook is imperative. And by the way, if Tim Cook calls you from Apple and he figures out a way to charge this without having me to take it off my wrist, this is an Apple Watch. I think that's some great technology that you guys have. So,
well, let me throw this out. Two things on that point, which I love it. The Apple Watch, right? There is wireless charging right now, but inside of that is a copper coil that you could not put in our device because it would not be MRI safe or compatible. So companies like Apple haven't even had to think about wireless charging in the manner we have to be MRI safe and compatible. So that's something we've had to actually overcome a little bit on our own end.
Yeah. All right. Any parting words for the audience on CraniUS and what the future holds for this area of modern medicine?
No, I mean, I would just say that we're incredibly bullish and, about the opportunity, but it comes down to the end of the day that every single person that works in our office and pretty much anybody who's invested in our company, and honestly, probably everybody on this call and that's probably going to listen to this interview, we all know somebody suffering from one of these diseases, right? And I think everybody's really just thinking about, with so much advancement in technology, how are we still where we're at? And I think it takes the type of ingenuity and thinking and really, the foresight that Dr. Gordon had, 10 years ago to get to where we're at today, to really build the canvas and, and build the foundation for what we're doing now. It is not easy, right? We are flying to the moon. We are doing something that's never been done before. We're creating a new market where there are not players that exist today. So you know this very well, Stephen, that creates a lot of challenges around it. So for us, it's about controlling the controllables, and where you can utilize technology that's already out there and widely accepted, and where you have to be novel, where you have to be different, you keep your focus there, but you want that to be narrow. And so that's really the foundation here. But we feel incredibly, inspired and proud, and I am, to be part of this team and this mission of really changing the way that we treat brain disease going forward.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of look, from a casual observer and someone who's kind of in the life science space and just becoming familiar with your company and your technology. I view your organization as a buoy of hope. And so you can think of like dementia and Alzheimer's as being, really serious prevalent diseases. They're kind of very mysterious. A lot of the drugs that have been developed and even approved, they just don't work. Certainly not the way people would want them to work. And I think that getting through the blood-brain barrier problem is going to open up a whole new ecosystem of drug development for Alzheimer's and dementia. And I think my theory on Alzheimer's and dementia is it's kind of like a cardiovascular disease, but it's not, like cardiovascular disease. I mean, is Dick Cheney still alive? Yes,
Right.
He is. Okay. So if you have a good cardiologist and you have a good drug therapy and you have like some intervention medically, a lot of your cardiovascular issues related to, say, heart disease, which I think has got to be one of the most number one common mortality factors in the world, it's pretty manageable. But in the brain, we don't have anything. So you can almost think of like, but what's weird is a lot of the things that you do to treat cardiovascular disease that are homeopathic or wellness related, they're the exact same things you do for cardiovascular disease. So my theory behind that is the brain is in a different system, right? So it's not in a blood system, it's in a cerebral fluid system.
Right.
And as soon as scientists kind of unlock how that cerebral fluid system supports the brain, they're going to be able to develop the drugs just like we have for cardiovascular disease. And it's going to unlock all this amazing longevity and hopefully quality of life for everybody. So what gets me excited is without that drug delivery system directly into the brain, some of those drugs are just impossible to develop. So again, your platform is giving all these patients and potentially future patients hope that we can unlock that and really have a new renaissance in treating brain disease. And for that, I want to thank you.
Thank you. That's the idea behind CraniUS for sure.